think the best place to start is to say that these secrets are not really secrets. They've been available to the public for almost 100 years, thanks to Israel regarding his work and several others. So this is in no way bringing public anything that's not already public. All this is out there. I'm going to give you some practical information on here, but if you know me, you know that we're going to start with some history. It just always is the case. So I'll try to be as brief as possible and not babble incoherently for very long. We'll see how that works. So let's get started. This guy, Eliphaz Levi, was he was a priest initially, highly intelligent man, and did a whole lot of research on the occult back in the early 1800s. I want to say in the 1830s. If you've ever seen a drawing of Baphomet, that came from him more than likely. That was his design. He brought that into being. Also, the Seal of Solomon that you sometimes see, one of the modern versions of that, that's one that he apparently created. So a lot of the imagery that we associate with this exercise I'm about to the occult and things like that came from him. Now, something else that he popularized in his works is the idea that the tarot, major arcana, corresponds with the Kabbalah. The 22 paths of the Kabbalah correspond with the 22 paths of the tarot. That became a very important idea for later occultists. Some of the public works that he gave on the tarot and the correspondences with the Kabbalah were inaccurate in the way that they were done. They were correct, but the position was off a little bit in some places. Now, the prevailing theory became that he was sharing things that were known to a certain order he belonged to, but he could only share so much. He couldn't give exactly how it worked, but he could sort of hint to it. And that's the same sort of thing that's done in a lot of writers like that. Some things that you'll read from Crowley won't really make any sense unless you know the background from it. The same thing for the Israel Regardie stuff. A lot of stuff doesn't make perfect sense unless you understand the background. And that's the way that he was doing his stuff. It was just kind of a tradition that when you put things out in the public, sometimes you'll hint, and people who understand it will understand. People who don't, won't. All right, fast forward to London in 1888. A group of 4 Freemasons form a society that's whole purpose is to study and learn some of things like the Hermetic principles, the Kabbalah, and numerology, astrology, a whole lot of different things. There's a whole backstory to that. We'll talk about that some other time, but for our purposes now, one of the main things that they were trying to do and succeeded extremely well is restore the esoteric tarot. Because the tarot had gotten to where it was used primarily for divination and fortune telling, things like that, but there was a deeper meaning. First of all, remember the as above, so below. The macrocosm is a reflection of the microcosm. In the tarot, what we're looking at is the pathways of the Kabbalah represented in a way that you can visually see. The Kabbalah is a map of the cosmos. It's also a pathway for personal growth, and similar to when you're doing chakra work, just a lot deeper and more intense. It's Eastern versus Western esoteric in some ways. I'm highly simplifying even that. One of the things that some members of the Golden Dawn believed, and I don't necessarily subscribe to, I'm just telling you what the belief was that when Adam and Eve were kicked out of the garden, the angels gave them instructions on how to reclaim that divine nature that they had lost And those steps were going from the earth, like from Malkuth, from the things of the earth of this planet, and working your way up through that to help basically evolve and rebuild who you are. Wherever the knowledge originated from, the tarot, used properly, is basically a map of the cosmos. In the major arcana, you have all stages of life, you have spiritual growth, you have the issues and problems, everything you come across. But it's also set up in a way that is an initiatory process. And I'm going to show you some of that in just a few minutes. We're not going to do all the cards. We're going to go a few tonight, and a few next week, so on and so on. There are 4 important tarot decks that have been created in the last century or so. They have a few things in common. Let's look at the creators. I'll start with my favorite. So, the Rider-Waite-Smith deck is probably the most influential deck as far as design goes in modern times. That one was created in a partnership with Arthur Waite and Pamela Coleman Smith, both members of the Golden Dawn. Pamela Coleman Smith is one of the most fascinating characters in history, and she's beautiful, interesting, amazing. Notice that you have a male who was the writer, the designer, and a female who illustrated and created the imagery for this. I really want to talk more about this just because Pamela Coleman Smith. But moving on. Later on in life, one of the last things Corelli did was the creation of his Thoth deck. He designed everything, and Lady Harris did the illustrations. Again, both former members of the Golden Dawn. Crowley at this point in time had moved on and done a lot of other things, but the Golden Dawn influences came through most of his work later on. The Tarot of the Golden Dawn, created by McGregor Mathers, one of the founders of the Golden Dawn, and Mona Mathers. He designed it, he wrote it up, she illustrated it. See the pattern here? It's like the creation of these decks went along with the principles of the masculine and feminine energy in both the Kabbalah with the pillar of mercy and pillar of severity, and in Kundalini when you have the masculine and feminine aspects in the Ida and Pingala. It's almost like the creation of the deck itself was some form of ritual, which is probable given the creators and the circumstances around it. But what they created was, again, a map to the cosmos in the major arcana. You have to separate the major arcana from the minor arcana, not for divination purposes. I mean, that they work together for that. But as far as this map of the cosmos we're speaking on, major arcana. Now, the 4th deck is a little different. Paul Foster Case created the Bodo deck. Now, he is the former head of the Golden Dawn here in America. Now, he created the designs, but they're not colored. They're black and white. His theory, and I like this a lot, his theory, his idea is that you need to color these decks as you're working with them, as you're learning them, so that you put a little bit of yourself into it. And that makes sense. But I have another theory, I'm just being funny here for a second, about why this is the only one that didn't have a female presence in it. I did notice that one of these things is not like the other. If you look at the first 3 and then you look at Mr. Case, it's a little bit of a difference. I'll let y'all sort that out. So where we're at is the Order of the Golden Dawn worked to reestablish the esoteric tarot to where it wasn't used just for what they consider to be kind of vulgar in some ways, is just for divination. Now, they use the tarot for divination and as a training tool in order to help people work on their intuition and work for not needing the tool. But they also used it to teach the higher level things, higher understanding of the pathways of life, the Kabbalah, of reestablishing who we are, of evolution of the soul, the Western esoteric version of a Kundalini awakening, so to speak. Now, let's take a look at a couple of the cards. So, the Magician. This is card number 1, but the second card in the Major Arcana because the Fool is 0. Now, if you'll notice that crimson red robe the Magician is wearing, that is generally the color of the Hierophant's robe. If you notice the tools that are laying around and the wand in hand, those are generally what's considered magical weapons. And it's not really weapons as such, but this is things that you would see in the neophyte ritual of the Golden Dawn. The wand in hand is used for opening and closing the doors to the temple. Notice on the table you have a pinnacle, which represents earth. You have the sword, which represents air. You have the cup, of course, represents water. And you have the rod to represent fire. Now, there are specific names for those inside the Golden Dawn, and there's a whole lot of different wands. The Golden Dawn was wand crazy, man. I mean, there's probably about 15 different wands for different things in there. Notice the infinity symbol over the head of the Magician. And if you pay close attention, if you look at the belt, that is also an infinity symbol. Now, the roses, the red and white roses, there's the esoteric and the exoteric for this. So this one, the obvious meaning behind the roses, the red represents desire and the white represents pure intentions. Now, this is not in any kind of romantic situation. This is about his intent and the tools he's working with. You may have seen the picture of Crowley in this exact same pose, the exact same tools. This is basically a visualization of a ritual. I think probably the neophyte ritual because it would make sense with the way the cards fall in order next. Now, I want you to notice the colors in this. The colors in this particular deck are all kind of similar. They have sort of the same flow to them. Well, the Golden Dawn was big on colors, and they have a set of color keys, color scales. Those go in with the Sephira of the Kabbalah. They go in with the tarot, the elements. It's correspondences. Numerology also plays heavily into this, the way these cards were designed. And the number 1 for the Magician, it represents creativity, new starts, new beginnings. Now, let's look at the High Priestess card. This one will give you an idea of exactly how intricate the designs are and how deep the symbolism here is. Now, if you look at the card, you'll notice the 2 pillars, the B and the J. And behind the High Priestess there in the background, what you're seeing is pomegranates. The 2 pillars you see represent Boaz and Hakin, which were the pillars in front of the Temple of Solomon. And that in turn represents the Kabbalah, which you can see further evidence of that in the pomegranates behind her. Those pomegranates each represent the Sephira of the Kabbalah. And In context, if you looked at the setup for the initiation of a neophyte into the temple, they represent the exchange and reconciliation of opposing forces. And they also have a slightly different name during that ritual. They're referred to as the Pillars of Hermes, of Seth, and of Solomon. Her positioning in the card suggests that she is holding the office of what's known as a hegemon, who was the assistant to the Hierophant in the officers of the Third Order. And she was the one who would bring the initiate, the neophyte, into the temple. So here she is guarding the gateway to the temple. And behind her is the Kabbalah, the tree of life, all that stuff that she's standing in front of. As she brings the person into the temple, then all that opens up. Now, if you'll notice on this, the positioning of Boaz and Hakin are reversed from what you would normally find. Normally, Boaz is going to be on the right, Hakin's on the left. This card, the High Priestess, is designed to be something that you're looking at internally, where you're looking at the Kabbalah from inside of you, not looking at it from the view of the cosmos. In other words, you're looking at this as the microcosm, not the macrocosm. You're seeing it inside of yourself, but that same reflection, as above, so below, is the map of the universe. The Kabbalah is the map to everything. Now, also notice that right after we have the magician, then comes the high priestess. So it is a masculine, feminine card. I mean, you see the moon symbolism in this. This is more of a feminine card, whereas the solar is in the magician. So you have that balance, just like in the creation of the cards, where you have the masculine and the feminine. You have the same thing inside the deck itself. And we won't get into them tonight, but the next two cards on this is we have the Empress and the Emperor. So there's an interplay with that as well. So we'll get into those eventually. But right now, I just wanted you to see these first couple of cards. We'll get to the Fool at some other time. I want it to make sense how I'm going to explain it, so I want to show you some other things first. So that'll maybe be next week. The main thing I want you to get out of this is just how deep it goes with the cards. Notice I haven't said anything about how to read the cards or how to do a tarot reading or anything like that. I want you to understand that these are designed as an initiatory process for transformation and change and internal alchemy of the soul, so to speak. So, one that was taught to memory. All right, let's try that. So, anyway, that is the basic principles of what the deck is for, why it exists. The versions that we're familiar with, the older cards, were a little bit deeper. It was designed as a pathway to enlightenment, a way to basically go in, tune yourself up, find that pathway forward, look into your soul, work through the chakras in a way, if you will. It's the same concept. It's just Eastern versus Western esoteric work. Now, these days, everybody's got their cute little kitty cat tarots and all that crap, and everybody loves them. That's great. For divination work, it's fine, but that's not exactly the same. And speaking of those, I am probably going to be giving away a couple tarot decks over the next couple of weeks. So I've got some cool ones coming, and I want us to just start doing giveaways on here just for the hell of it. So I'm going to show you guys now a very, very simple exercise, but it's one that was taught when people were beginning to learn to read in the Golden Dawn. So If you are working on your intuition and you want to learn how to read, this is a good little exercise. So, this exercise I'm about to show you is one that was taught to members of the Golden Dawn in order to learn to read the tarot for divination purposes. The idea was that the tarot was a tool to help you develop your skills to be able to work without it. But it starts out by using a deck of plain playing cards. And my mom could actually read very well with regular playing cards. She preferred them for some reason. But this isn't about reading the cards as such. This is about sharpening your intuition. So you'll take a regular deck of playing cards, take them out of the case, and set them on the table. Now the fun part. Flip them over, trying to predict what color cards you're going to have. Not the numbers, not the suits, just the color. As you work with it and progress, then you can work on guessing what suit it is. More accurate you get. Hello, JoJo. How you doing, kitty? So the more you do it, the more accurate you get. The more JoJo. Okay, so it's a very simple process, and I think that you get the. Now we'll hopefully coming back from that slight technical difficulty. Um, I love having a cat again. JoJo's a pain in the ass, but it's really nice to have another kitty. My cat Hawkins I had for so many years before he passed, and it's nice to have another one. But for tonight, yeah, it's not much, but that's what we got so far. I'm going to keep building onto this and hopefully build out a full class on the details on everything. But that should give you an understanding of how we got first initially away from the intended purpose of the tarot when everybody was just using it for reading. They were just using it for fortune telling and divination. That's not the purpose of the major arcana. The major arcana is designed to help you work on yourself. Yes, you can read with it. I use it all the time. Now, the deck that I use is not one of those four decks. I like all those, but my favorite deck is the Elemental Tarot, and it's because it has so much detail in it, and I've used it for so many years I can work with it. But there's a whole lot of choices out there, whatever resonates with you. But if you want to do work spiritually and actually grow metaphysically and follow that pathway of the Kabbalah and work on the whole personal growth and change and internal alchemy, pick one of those older decks. They work great. So questions, comments, ideas. Oh, hello over there on Twitch. Yeah, I've been neglecting you guys. I'm sorry. I can't communicate with the Twitch folks as easy as I can on Facebook. So, I'll get to my full Twitch live later. So, any questions, thoughts, ideas before I jump off here for the night? Yes, I will be doing another one of these. And this is really just the start of this. I'll break down each and every card individually over a period of time. I think I'm going to do a lot of these on Fridays, but I've got other stuff I'm working on too. Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you, Stephanie. You guys have a great night. And remember that next Wednesday is live meditation for those here local in the Clanton Library and from 7 to 9. Next Friday will be another one of these classes. And if I know me, I'll probably bump out 2 or 3 things in between. Have a good night, guys. Thank you, Lori. I appreciate that a lot. Means a lot to me.